Hey guys, DPG here with another fantastic video on acting. Today, I would like to share with you the three main differences between theater acting and TV and film acting. All right, the first difference that I would say you will notice between theater acting and TV and film acting is the preparation. When you get a theater acting job, you generally are going to count on having probably at least a few weeks of preparation, and you will work together with the entire cast and potentially the crew, definitely the directors and possibly the producers, likely at the actual theater where you will be performing the play, because they need to know what the different blocking that they will create will look like when you are actually performing the piece. There's also probably a good chance that you are doing a play that has been performed before, and so there will be a lot of discussion and ideas that are already floating around about how the play should be performed, how each character has been performed in the past, and trying to find some new ways to bring life to an existing project. You are also probably going to have a lot of rehearsals, potentially one every single day, sometimes two a day, depending on how elaborate the production is, how much money they have, how big the cast is, how big the crew is, but you should be prepared to be called in for early morning rehearsals, possibly evening rehearsals. It's all going to really depend on the budget, the scope of the production, how big the theater is, and how elaborate the sets will be, whether you're going to actually get to work with the sets. Are they going to be built ahead of time? Are they going to be built very late just before you actually perform the piece? Now, the preparation for most TV and film, I can't say all because everything is done slightly differently, and film tends to have a longer time frame to create, and so it's possible there will be more theater-like preparation for film, but let's just say you're not one of the leads, and if you are one of the leads, you don't need to listen to my videos. But if you are one of the parts that isn't going to be involved from the get-go in the production, whether it's TV or film, your preparation time is going to be almost none, to maybe a little bit if you are lucky. When I say almost none, I'll just back it up a little bit. The audition process is probably the first time you will have seen this material because it was probably created very recently. These characters and this storyline has never been shown before. So you are probably going to be, alongside of the audience, one of the first few people to ever see the material. So obviously you won't have any backstory to work from. You won't have any past productions to consider when deciding how you are going to approach this performance and this character. You're also not going to get much help from the director or the producer because there is likely not going to be any rehearsal process whatsoever until the actual day of the shoot, and even then there may be no rehearsal at all, because the way it will work on TV and film sets is they usually, this is the professional level, they'll usually have two teams, right? The actual actors themselves, the performer, that's known as Team 1, and then there's Team 2, and they are the stand-ins. And so the stand-ins will do all of the blocking before the actors walk in. So that way the crew, the camera people, the lighting, they'll know what everything looks like more or less. And that's why the stand-ins kind of have to look like you, your size, your coloration, etc. So they know how the lights and everything else will work and how the scene will appear. But you will be likely in your trailer, if you're not already on the set, when they're doing the blocking. And then They may bring you in for a team one blocking because obviously after everybody else knows what they are doing, you will need to know what you're doing if there's any movement involved. But if it's a static piece where you're kind of all sitting around a table, they probably won't need to bring you in for a rehearsal at all. They may bring you in, but that is going to be largely dependent on the style of the directors and the producers and whether or not they like rehearsals. Some people don't like rehearsals at all. Clint Eastwood is famous for just telling actors, let's do a rehearsal, and they do the rehearsal, and then he says, okay, moving on, and they say, what are you talking about? We just did a rehearsal. He goes, no, I got it. So he's actually running the camera when they think they're rehearsing because he thinks people are more relaxed that way. So that's why it's really important to know your material as well as possible, especially for TV and film, and especially when you're starting out, because you don't want to get caught up in the nerves of, oh my gosh, I don't know my lines when you walk onto the set, because it happens very quickly in TV and film. Okay, you're going to be called from your trailer. You're going to be sat down in a director's chair, offered some water, and then you're going to walk onto the set when they call you, and you might be shooting right then. There may be no rehearsal whatsoever. So that pretty much summarizes the preparation of theater versus film. Theater generally has a lot of preparation, from days up until weeks and possibly months, depending on how big things are. And TV and film can have everything from a little bit of preparation, rehearsal, access to material, from maybe a few days, but actually working with the other actors and the cast and the crew, usually very little. Okay, let's talk about the second difference between theater and TV and film, and that is the repetition. And I bring this up because you may love one level of repetition and you may not love it. And one medium, theater, may involve more of one type of repetition compared to TV and film. So theater obviously tends to run for extended periods of time, meaning they don't make money unless you're doing a performance. So they want to generally run them as many times as they can. And if you get onto a stage like in the London or one of the big theater towns like New York, Broadway or whatever, they are going to sometimes run for years. And that means you will be doing maybe 8 performances a week, maybe 9 performances a week, if that makes sense. So, 5 evening performances Monday through Friday, and then maybe 2 on the weekends, possibly 3 on the weekends, who knows? So that means you're going to be saying the same lines over and over and over and over and over and over. And, some people are going to like that. Some people are not going to like that. And obviously, it's going to be different with TV and film. With TV and film, yes, you may be repeating the same lines over and over and over, but it's usually one day of that scene. And so you may do a scene 30 times. I've done lots of scenes 30 times or more because they are trying to capture every angle. They are trying to get different lighting, different looks, everything. There are so many nuances in TV and film that will help tell the story, and they never know exactly how something's going to work or how something's going to look until they try it. And so they will look at something, and they don't know what the scene before looks like, potentially, and they don't know what the scene after potentially is going to look like, because maybe it's shooting out of order, which is very common. And so they are going to shoot it every which way they can to make sure that they have every option covered, so that when they go into editing, they can then say, okay, well, we've decided on this for the scene prior, so now we have to use this version of the scene that we recorded for this scene, and now we know that this following scene has to look like this, because it all has to fit together to tell the story the way they end up wanting to tell it. So you can see that there are really 2 main differences in the repetition involved in theater and film. And that is that in theater, there can be a lot of repetition, but it's usually the same production night after night after night after night. And the repetition involved in TV and film is literally saying the same lines that you never read before or never heard of before over and over and over in a very condensed amount of time. And again, maybe one is more appealing than the other to you. And so this is just a decision you're going to have to make going forward with your career. Do you like the idea of doing a performance and honing it and perfecting it night after night after night after night? Or maybe that sounds like really boring to you. And the alternative is, do you want to work in TV and film where you might do the same scene 30 times over the course of a couple of hours, and then you disappear and you do nothing for several hours, and then you come back and you do maybe the same scene again when they move the cameras around another 30 times. So that is really how the TV and film repetition is different from theater. Okay, and the final difference I'm going to share with you today between theater and film is the camaraderie. There is a real sense of camaraderie when you do theater. You spend so much time in rehearsals, and you could spend weeks, months, or even years with people during the performances, and so there tends to be a strong bond, like a feeling of family between the cast members in particular, and probably the crew members in particular, not so much between the cast and the crew, because they don't generally spend a lot of time together. But often the cast members on smaller productions all share changing rooms. As you've seen in a lot of movies, you can see there's a changing room and everybody has their own little station where they do their changing and they apply their own makeup potentially. And so it's much more of a family type of feeling. And you know, you're going to like some of your family members and some of them you're not going to like as much. But in theater, you tend to grow a bond over time. Even if it's a bond with people you don't particularly care for, they're still family, because you're going to practice with them, rehearse with them, change with them, and probably wine and dine and go out and celebrate after, as well as being on the stage doing your performances together. TV and film is almost the opposite of that. In TV and film, the chances are you have never met any of the people that you will be acting with before you're actually on set with them. Of course, there are differences varying from production to production, and depending on the size of the role you have, and just depending on how they prefer to operate. Sometimes you will be invited to a table reading, and sometimes you won't. If you are invited to a table read, you may have a few moments to sort of make a cursory, like, oh, hello, I've read about your part, so cool, you're exactly what I imagined, whatever. You may get a chance to say hello to a producer or a director, but generally they don't really do a lot of talking to actors. One of the reasons they don't talk to actors too much is because they don't want to disrupt them and make them uneasy. There's nothing worse than, saying the wrong thing to an artist and throwing them off their game. So you will generally not spend a lot of time with people on a film or TV set outside of mealtime and break time, because most of the time the way they like to treat actors is very differently than the way actors are treated in theater. The way they treat actors on TV and film is to keep them isolated from everyone else. You are isolated even from the other actors because they will put you in your own change room and trailer, because I guess the idea is that you will be more comfortable that way, which is probably true. It's more like living in the lap of luxury. But at the same time, there is no getting to know people. There's no one to talk to. You can theoretically, if the weather's good, you could sit outside on the steps of your trailer. But for the most part, they don't want you interfering in the process of whatever else is happening, and they don't want to interfere in your process. So you will find that you don't often get to talk to anybody all day for any significant amount of time. And even when it's lunchtime, Sometimes the actors will take their lunch back to their trailer so they can do their own thing, whatever that is. And sometimes, so you'll be sitting with some crew members, and you know what? It's weird. But again, I think there's a reason for this. It's like they won't say too much to you. They will talk to you, but they're certainly not going to say anything controversial or really try to get to know you. Again, because I think there's sort of an industry understanding of don't mess with the talent. Because if you say the wrong thing, maybe you make some political commentary about the president or whatever, anything else, policies, you could throw somebody off their game and ruin, the rest of the day's shooting. So in general, in TV and film, you are going to be highly isolated, and it can be lonely. And for that reason, this is a little tip I'll tell you, that you will probably want to bring a lot of material with you because you just never know how long it's going to be before you're called to set and you actually get to do some acting or rehearsing or anything like that. That's just something I would advise people to do, whether they're going into theater or film. But in theater, generally, the second you get there, there's stuff to do. You're doing stuff. And in film and TV, it's the opposite. You can get there and do nothing for hours and hours. And in fact, I can think of one particular pilot that I worked on where I was called in for a 9 a.m. call time, and for whatever reason, probably because it was a pilot and they didn't have sort of a shooting rhythm, I wasn't called to the set until 5 p.m. and then I was kept there until midnight. So I was called in at 9 a.m. and I literally was in my trailer for 8 hours. I would leave on occasion, but they don't like it when you leave because then they don't know where you are. And, I was kind of bored out of my mind. And then at 5 p.m., I was finally called to the set. So that can be a very challenging environment, and you really need to learn how to deal with all that time. And unfortunately, nobody teaches you this, but I will have a series of videos on what to do with your time on the set when you're not shooting. Anyway, guys, those are the three main differences in the actual performing and preparation of theater versus TV and film. If you liked this, then give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel, and of course click the bell for notifications. But just to recap, the three main differences are the preparation, the repetition, and the camaraderie. Okay? So let me know what you think, and if you are interested in some cool merch, go to teespring.com/hackhollywood. Otherwise, let me know what you guys think in the question and comment section below. Talk to you soon.